just go by the name. You got to go.
Mike's alive.
Okay, Mike's alive. Good evening, it's 6 o'clock, and the Personnel Advisory, Administrative Affairs Committee is meeting at 6 PM, and I will ask the clerk to give us a roll call, please.
Alderman Karen.
Here.
Alderwoman Alderwoman Kelly. Here. Alderman Wilshire is here. Alderman Lopez. Here. Alderman Gidge is not here. We also have with us this evening Alderman Jetty and Alderman Harriet Gathright. Also in attendance, His Honor the Mayor, Jim Donchis.
Okay, do we have any public comment? Nothing, okay. So, I guess the question was to see if, because the mayor has another meeting to attend, he would like us to go into unfinished business resolutions. Could I have a motion to that effect, please?
I will move to recommend final passage of Resolution 18066.
Okay. Any concerns, comments? All those in favor?
I'm sorry. You wanted a motion to take, to
Suspend the rules. Yes.
Okay.
Is that what you did?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules to go out of order to take up Resolution 18066.
Okay. Any questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we will take up unfinished business resolutions. Alderman Wilshire.
Resolution 18066 relative to addressing possible inequities in sick leave policy for certain unaffiliated employees. I will motion for final passage of Resolution 18066.
Okay. You heard the motion, and on your desk, there was some updated information, questions that I specifically asked former President McCarthy to address to the mayor. So, yes.
I'd like to make a motion to accept a communication that was received after the agenda was prepared from Kim Kleiner regarding Personnel Advisory Board.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Do you want a minute or two to just kind of glance over? Or do you want His Honor to speak?
I read the email.
Okay.
I'm good moving forward.
Mayor Donchis, if you'd like to speak on this resolution, and I'm sure while the aldermen are reviewing this, and they might have some questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, especially for moving the meeting back to 6 o'clock, because I do have a conflict at 7, and you'd asked some questions which I wanted to address, so I really appreciate your getting everybody together at 6 o'clock.
That's okay, you're paying for dinner.
Just to review what this is, the idea is, or the proposal as incorporated in the resolution, is to go back to 2001, when there was a benefit change made, and restore a larger severance to the people who were affected by the change back in 1991. I believe that the fairest thing to do is to do nothing, because no matter what we do, what the city does, or what the Board of Aldermen votes, or however this comes out, someone is going to say it's unfair. Now, the question number one was, how much will this cost? And there's two versions. There's the original version and there's the amended version, which would, before this committee, the amended version, I think, is what is before you, and it would make a full restoration of the severance benefits that were changed back in 2001. There's a list of the employees who would be affected, and it's about 11 or 12 people, and the total cost would be $175,000. Again, these are people who were hired in the window of 1995 to 2001. The way severance was accumulated, they would be affected. All would receive severance anyway, I think to the tune of more than, I think it's 190-some thousand they would get. This would increase their severance benefit in total from about 190 and increase that number by $175,000. If that were done, in my opinion, the people who would say that it was unfair would be those who were also hired in that same period of time, 95 to 2001, who have since retired. On another, most of them, just because they happen to be a little older and therefore a little further advanced in their careers than the ones who are still working for the city. For example, the former city clerk, Ron, a guy who used to run the landfill, somebody who was the chief assessor, a woman who worked at the library. These are mostly management employees who were making healthy salaries, $70,000 and above by and large. Not every single one of them, but the vast majority of them. Maybe up to even six figures. And so there are a group of about 11 employees who were 12 employees who were hired in that period of time, whose severance benefit was changed back in 2001, and who just happened to retire earlier. And I think they would say, well, wait, the people that I was working alongside of who were hired I was hired in the same time frame, you're giving an enhanced severance to some of the people who are still working for the city. I was in the same category. I've retired. I should be entitled to the same severance benefit because my benefit was changed back in 2001. And if you can understand the argument from them that it would be unfair to give it to some but not all employees in that category, there would be an immediate cost of another $152,000 to pay this severance benefit to the people in the same category who've already retired. And then if we do that, we are increasing severance benefits by $300 and some thousand, and at least in my view, then the national taxpayers say, well, how is this fair to us? I mean, these benefits were changed back 17 years ago. We've been through several mayoral administrations, many members of the Board of Aldermen. This has been the same for the last 17 years. It's too late to go back and change at a cost of $300 and some thousand. So in my opinion, we should leave things the way they are. And I know there's some disagreement about this, but in my opinion, we should leave things the way they are and let what was done 17 years ago remain in place.
Okay.
But with that, I can answer any questions that any members of the committee
Certainly.
have, if you have any.
Okay, if we're going with that theory, Mayor, if we gave it back to some employees already, then why wouldn't we give it to the rest of them?
And I should have mentioned that. So when this change to the merit system was passed, the fire department argued that, when the last change to the merit system was passed this year, 6 months or 8 months ago, and this severance benefit was not touched for any of these people, but there were people in the fire department. It turns out one person who would be affected by this. There's only one person currently, well, let me go back a little bit, just to explain what this is. So people in the fire department, the management argued that when a person at the fire department achieves the rank of captain, they're still covered by the union contract, and they still get a severance benefit that's equivalent to this. And they argued that if the severance benefit that had existed in 2001 were not restored for deputies and the chief of the fire department, that they could not persuade, or they they were afraid that for their management succession, their leadership succession, they might lose people because captains might say, well, look, I don't want to become a deputy because I'm going to lose this severance. So they argued that as a sort of operational necessity, the severance benefit should remain unchanged for people that advance in the ranks in the fire department. Now, it turns out that although there are 6 management positions, only, meaning the chief, the deputy, and 4, the chief, the assistant, excuse me, and 4 deputies, there's only 1 person among those 6 who is in the category that would be affected by this. So when you, the Board of Aldermen, changed the merit system earlier in the year, it did affect 1 person in the fire department. And that's how it happened. And maybe that was right and maybe it was wrong, but they did articulate a management imperative, and you know, I guess the argument would be, well, because it was done for that 1 employee, it needs to be done for 30 more or whatever, 25 more. I don't see it that way, but I'm saying that no matter what we do, someone's going to say it's unfair.
Follow-up, Alderman Lucia.
Yeah, we were told that it affected 6 or 7 people in that department. How did that change?
Well, the theory was that it could accept that 6 or 7 positions were were affected by the language. But as it happens, the people in those positions were not hired in this window. They were hired before. They were already working for the city before 1995. If you think about it, the chief was working for the city before 1995. The assistant was working for the city before 1995, and you know who I'm talking about when I say those people. And 3 of the deputies were also working for the city before 1995. 1 deputy was hired between 95 and 2001.
You're done. Alderman Lopez.
So I think my understanding of what you're presenting as concerns can be summarized first as something like a no true Scotsman. There's no just way to do this at all because somebody's going to be unhappy. I'm not sure I agree with that because I think we already did something that made 1 person approach a more fair level of compensation. And when we did that, we thought it was going to affect 6 people, but it ended up affecting 1. I think if we do adopt at least the amendment where we offer the switch, where a person can choose either the original benefit that they were promised at hiring or the updated version that was changed without their permission, they can self-select and say, okay, well, I have enough sick hours to make this worth restoring it back to the original way, or they could say, I don't have enough. So based on that logic, I don't think everybody on this list is actually going to trigger the benefit automatically if we do offer them the self-selection. And then the second part of what I hear is if you give a mouse a cookie, every time you award this benefit back to somebody, somebody else is going to come forward and ask for it. If that's the case, then that's already happening. The cat's out of the bag, and we already have somebody who has received it. So now this issue has been raised and discussed at length and brought up to the newspaper. And I'm much more comfortable drawing the line at current employees than having our current employees basically be told, you guys got your rules changed on you and we're not going to do anything about it because we're afraid that people who are no longer current employees and have already received their severance are going to challenge it. And then finally, I would want to point out that in that other scenario with the fire department where we thought all of the possible eligible employees were going to get the benefits and it was going to be a serious compensation issue, they didn't all do that. And likewise, it's been represented a couple times, either intentionally or not, that this is a large amount of money per person when it's not. It's being split over many, many staff who have provided many, many, many decades collectively of work. And it's not, on an individual basis, that much more that's going to them. The change that we're talking about right here is estimated as a total $175,000 more, which does sound like a lot if you're talking about multiplying it times multiple people, but you're not. You're dividing it by all of the employees who would likely take it first of all, and then you're deducting the ones who don't. So I still think in the grander scheme of cost effectiveness, it's more important for us to recognize that we set an expectation for employees that we changed, reinstate that expectation for the employees who are still working here, and there's going to be a battle either way at some point, whether it's with employees who have retired and gone and done their service and now they're going to come back asking for more. I'm not sure we can take it for granted that every single person who's ever retired from the city is going to come back and want another piece of the pie. But I'd rather fight it on those terms and say, well, this is what your severance was. And my understanding from Attorney Bolton when he came and presented to us was that the legislation and the amendment that we're talking about affects current employees and their upcoming severance, not past employees. So we aren't giving it to a bunch of employees who've already left.
The only thing I would add is when the amended version gives someone a choice of a higher benefit or a lower benefit, I mean, we're assuming, and I think there's been some discussion, but we're assuming that people are going to automatically, I mean, who's going to elect a lower benefit? So you know, if your choice were between a $10,000 severance and 20, I mean, people are going to take the 20. So that's where the $175,000 estimate comes from.
Alderman Lopez.
So to clarify that, that's not what was being suggested at all. The amendment was between the number of total hours that they could get a percentage of, or if they have a much higher number of hours, then it's a different percentage. So it's not a flat, oh, I think I'm going to take the $5,000 check or the $10,000. It's a reflection of how many sick hours they actually already have. You can't ask for more sick hours if you don't have them.
They'll take the better of two options, which means the more expensive option for the city.
Or it could mean that some people take exactly the option that you want them to take by choice instead of having it forced on them.
Okay. All right. So I don't think, here is my issue, and we've spoken about this before. When this was done, in all reality, those people who had been working for the city under a certain benefit program, all but a small group from 1995 to 2000 were given that benefit. They kept that benefit. From 2000, anyone hired from 2001 was to get the new benefit, which any company, private or public, can do, change benefits, because I know in the 40 years I was here, my benefits changed 3 times. Some for the good, sometimes not. But in all fairness, everyone who had been working prior to 2000 should have been part of that prior benefit, because that's what they were hired under. This many sick days, this many vacation days, et cetera, et cetera. When the change came, it should have been for everyone. And I know we fought about that because they wanted to bring it way back to, not just to 95, but way back. And they fought that. So see what happens when you assume anything. I thought that had been resolved and it was date certain. But if you look at these numbers, because one of the questions I asked you was the sick leave. If you look at some of these numbers, you've got a few people that have 6 hours, 20 hours. You have others who have 1,300. Obviously, if someone has 1,300 hours and they want to go back to what they could be guaranteed, which was 720, they lose some of that because no one can carry more than 720 hours, period. So if you look at the first one here, that's like, I don't know, 400 hours that they would lose because they have to start at a base of no higher than 720. And as far as people that have long retired, as you said, they've had 17 years in which to make their complaints known. And I know that some of them did do that, but didn't voice it to anyone that could have tried to make a difference. And as far as the fire department, so that means those people in the administrative, 5 of those 6 were hired before 1995, so they didn't fall into that basket. This one person who was moving from one level to the other fell in that basket. So you were trying to rectify it, but for me, if you can give it to one, and I'm not saying you personally, but if you can give it to one to make it right, then you should be able to give it to the other 8, 9, or 10 to make it whole. And as Alderman Lopez said, that number, that 175,000 or 200,000, is spread over a long period of time, and it's not one person. For some of these people, they might have another 10 or 15 years before they retire. Others might only have 5 or 6. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody to see how much longer they want to stay. So my feeling is that we have to do right by them to make it right, to make people feel that we did everything we could to make it right. Now, whether the committee decides to give them a choice, that's up to the committee and then the board as a whole. We had talked about what we have brought in, what we felt that might be feasible and workable and everybody would be happy. But I'm not the final say. The committee as a whole has to make those decisions. So I appreciate that you answered all the questions, Mayor. I know that it can be frustrating when you're trying to figure something out and what's right and what we should make right. But I think this is the right thing to do, and I guess which I don't usually do. I tried to compromise, but I guess I've dug my heel in, and I just feel this is what we need to do. But I am just the chair. I don't dictate. So whatever the committee and then the Board of Aldermen decides, we accept that. Do you
All right, now you understand what I have said, I think. I guess my only factual addition would be that some of the people who have retired in this category, it's not, it's like this year,
Right.
or last year. I mean, these
Yeah,
are
some
very,
have been a while.
Yes.
Sure.
Some have been longer, but some have been recent. So I don't know if you need, unless you got questions for me, I mean, I don't know if you need more input from me, but I've told you what I think.
I know you.
You've got the figures. Obviously, someone's going to be unhappy no matter what we do, and so do you want me to stick around? Or
If you could, if we're still having some dust, if you have a little bit of time,
Yeah, I do.
because you have a few minutes.
Yeah.
And I agree, whatever decision is made, some people are happy, some people won't be. But I look at it as, we looked at it long and hard. It's been months. And I think that we need to settle this one way or another and bring it to the full board and make a decision. Alderman Jettie, did you have a question?
Yeah, if I could
Sure.
take advantage of the mayor while
You're
he's,
taking advantage of the mayor.
if he's still here.
Uh-oh.
Thank you, Mayor, for staying.
I'm not on this committee, but I will be voting on this eventually. And I was was, I'm interested in, being fair to people, and, the idea of, if somebody enters into an employment contract, you specialized in employment law, so you know more about this than I do, but I would think that, when someone enters into this employment contract with the city, and the city says you're going to get a particular benefit, um, I think that employee should be able to rely upon the city fulfilling its obligation under whatever contract they made with him. So could you help me understand when, back when when this was changed, um, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but it treated people that were already employees differently. It didn't say, I don't remember what year it was, but whatever year it was, it didn't say, okay, everybody that has been working here up until now keeps this benefit, and the people that are going to be hired after this are going to get a different benefit. It went back and said if you were hired more than 5 years ago, you keep the benefit, but if you were hired within the last 5 years, you don't get the benefit. Can you
Yeah.
clarify
Sure.
that for me?
So, first of all, there were no employment contracts. I mean, like one of the people on this list was working for the city for like 9 months, and they're told, well, there's such and such a retirement benefit, and they're told that their salary is such and such, but there's no legal obligation that says because you hire someone under a certain set of conditions, that those conditions have to remain in effect for the next 30 or 40 years. I mean, these are at-will employees. Their salary could be lowered, their salary can be raised, benefits can be changed. Recently, 5-6 years ago, we changed the health benefit for these very same people, requiring that they pay more in terms of health care, up from 20 to 30% for a point of service plan, and up from 10 to 20% of the total cost of a HMO. I mean, the employer has a right to change compensation at any time for an at-will employee. So so I'm just saying, just because someone worked for a day under a certain benefit scheme, that doesn't mean that the city is bound to that benefit scheme for the next 40 years, unless there were an employment contract, which there's not.
Could I just interrupt?
Yes,
Ask a
Alderman.
question while you're on
Yeah.
that point? I understand there was no written employment contract, but if I say to you, if you come to work for the city and you're going to accumulate sick leave at so many days or so many hours per month, and then, so you work for 5 years, and then I would think that during those 5 years, I would have accumulated that benefit, and I've earned it. I don't think it's fair for you to take it away from me retroactively. You can say, okay, you've earned this up until now, but we're changing things, so from now on, you're not going to get that same benefit. But you can't, I don't think it's fair to take away what I've already earned. You can say, in the future, you're going to get a different benefit, and I can decide, well, I don't want to work here anymore because I don't like that. I have a choice, but to take something away from me that I've already earned, if I understand this correctly, I may not. But
All right,
to
well-
take something that I've already earned doesn't seem right.
So my first comparison was with the healthcare situation. People started with the city, thousands of people or hundreds of people in the so-called merit system, thinking that, when they were hired, the city paid 90% of a HMO plan, but that was changed to 80. And that's the way it
But
was. The city,
prospectively,
right? Well, you got to wait till I actually get the sentence or the paragraph out. That was changed prospectively, yes. So what you've raised is the fact that that these people may have earned a portion of this severance between the day they were hired and 2001, the data was changed. And if they did, you're saying the city should pay what was earned, but can prospectively change the system. Now, the numbers we are discussing, this 175,000 for the additional 175,000 for the existing employees on top of the 190 they already have in approximate numbers, or for the retirees, the additional $152,000 goes way beyond what they had earned as of the date the change was made. And the amended version in the committee which gives them the choice of two benefit schemes, two severance schemes, one of which is higher, goes way beyond what they had earned at the time. So the way it worked was that up to 2001, you could accumulate
Up to 700.
up to 720 hours of sick time and be paid that upon retirement. In 2001, the system was changed to say that you, with no cap, you get paid 20% of all unused sick time, with no cap. But it was felt that that provided a stronger disincentive to unnecessarily use sick time, because the other way you worked, and it was actually less expensive for the city probably, you work, once you accumulate 720 hours under the old system, there's no incentive not to take sick time because, well, that's not, I don't know exactly what they were thinking at the time. But in any event, if you go with what was earned under the old system as of the 2001 date, what you get is the version that's in front of you without the amendment. You follow that? I don't have the resolution right in front of me, but the resolution that has been proposed and which was discussed in advance of its submission says, okay, you get 100% of what you earned through the date in 2001, but you only get 20% of what you earned thereafter. So as proposed in the resolution, they would get what they had earned as of 2001, but would not get 20%, and then would get only 20% going forward. The committee has recommended a change that would give them the choice, which of course, people are going to take the higher benefit, and that will be for all of them, the 720 hours. The old system. So what the committee amendment says, well, you could choose the reduced benefit, but you also can choose to just go back to the old system, and if you choose that, you'll get, you can, by simply choosing the old system, you can undo the change that was made in 2001 and undo it not just to the date of the change, but for your entire career, your entire tenure with the city.
Alderman Jettie.
So the people who worked here before 2001 or were hired, what's the 1995 date? Well, how does that affect?
The way it worked was no benefit change was made for anyone who had been hired before 1995. So the city comes in 2001 and says, okay, we're going to change the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone hired from now on gets only 20% up with no cap in severance of their sick time accumulation. But also said, we're not changing the system for anyone that was hired before 1995. But for those, but looking back 6 years from 2001, we're going to say that those people who were hired after 1995 will only be able to accumulate 20% of their sick time, will only be paid 20% of their accumulated sick time in severance. And what the argument you are, I think, articulating, or the point, is that you're raising the issue of, well, the city could, for new employees, impose that. Maybe we could change, maybe they could have changed the system going forward. But what about if someone under the old system had worked there 2 years and had accumulated 100 hours? You're saying, aren't they entitled to the 100 hours? Aren't they entitled to the 100 hours? That's the question you're asking. Or if they'd accumulated 20 hours or whatever it is, weren't they entitled to that number, even though the city could change the benefit going forward? The actual resolution that is proposed, but not the amendment, gives the employees what had been earned before the date of, up to the date of the change, but then says, but from now on, you can only earn 20%. So it would restore what was earned up to between 95 and 2001. But the committee amendment, which then, this is all very confusing, so I'm probably being repetitive, but it's hard to follow it really. But
It's okay, I need the repetition.
the committee amendment, which gives them the choice, basically says, look, if you want to go back to the old system, which was changed for your entire career, even if you worked here for 9 months, you can do that.
Could I?
Alderman Jettie.
So the resolution as originally proposed would restore those benefits that were lost from 1995 to 2001. But the amendment does something different. So are you in favor of the original resolution?
Well, that's a harder question to answer. But just to go back, I will answer it, but just to make sure, so what the version unamended before the committee says is, if you were here for 2 years and you earned 50 hours, you get those 50 hours, and then from that day on, 20%. If you were here, 2 days and you earned 1 hour, it's 1 hour plus 20%. If you were here for 5 years and you earned 200 hours, you get 200 hours, what you'd earned as of that date, and then 20% going forward. I guess, so your question is, do I favor the original proposal? Well, it's better than the committee amendment. I got to say that. What concerns me as we've gotten deeper and deeper into this is for the existing employees, without the amendment, the cost is $69,000. And that is a definite figure because I believe that's correct, Madam Chair. I think it's 69 because that is a known quantity, because that's an earned figure between 95 and 2001.
Because that's based on what you had.
It's what the
was
people
shown.
had.
Right, okay.
That's what the people had.
Thank you.
And then then there would be 20. So if the additional amount in that 6-year window would be 69,000. And I know there's, people say, well, who cares about the people who've left? Well, if we're concerned about fairness, why does the city clerk who retired a couple years ago get a very, very central person in city government? He doesn't get the benefit, but someone who, is working in an important job, but not as important as that one, gets the benefit simply because they were a little younger and retire a few years later. I mean, to me, that seems unfair. And if you then extend this benefit, the earned portion to those employees, you do add, I believe the figure is 25,000. If you give them the committee amendment, you add 152,000 for those employees.
Okay, so
Now, are those clear? Those answers clear?
Yeah, and so
I don't-
my follow-up question would be, why did the committee, I suppose someone else from the committee could answer why they changed it? What is the purpose
Okay,
of
so
the
I'll
amendment?
answer, when this was first brought up, myself and Alderman Wilshire spoke to the mayor. We had a conversation. We went back a second time and talked about those people that were in the system from 95 to 2000. And the question was, how much sick leave did each one of those individuals have when 2001 came and the change came? So we got those figures, okay? So let's say somebody had 50 hours. So the suggestion was, can we lock those hours in? So John Jones had 50 hours as of 2001. When he or she retired, they'd get 20% of that number. So let's say they had 1,000 hours, so 20% is about 200. Plus, they would get that 50 hours to 250. They couldn't go higher. I mean, we weren't looking for anybody to get more than 720 hours. But even looking at these numbers, I mean, you've got people who have 1 or 2 digits. You have some who never takes time off, and not because they're sick, but they just don't utilize the time. When the amendment came in, and I think it was Alderman Lopez who made the amendment, it was based on one of the employees who felt that they were better off staying within the 20%, because if you looked at their hours, they had quite a few, and they felt that if they got sick all of a sudden, because they're getting older, even though they may not retire for the next up to 10 years, that they would have more than if they reverted back to the
They're using
720.
a short-term disability.
Right, right.
Well, my understanding is that employee didn't understand what was actually before the committee, and when that employee came to understand that, he said, oh, well, actually,
I think they had a
I-
conversation with
yeah,
someone,
yeah.
yeah. So the amendment went in, the committee as a whole voted to make that amendment. And then it was pulled. At the full board, we tabled it and sent it back to committee.
Can I add, since I was the one who sponsored?
Okay, let me finish first?
Sure.
Thank you. So, this gets more, sometimes it gets more complicated than it should be. I understand what you're saying about those people who have retired, but I will repeat that this is a long time, from 2001 to now, and those people who have retired had plenty of time to seek out to get that change, to get that benefit back, or to argue that before they retired. So I don't think that, as much as I respect all these people, I probably worked with most of them, I don't think those people who are long gone from the city and have been gone 4, 5, whatever amount of years, I don't think that is what should be looking at. We should be looking at those 8 to 10 people that are in the here and now that, to me, were put in a basket. I can't imagine a company not grandfathering everyone. And I know there were changes, Mayor, because for a long time, I paid no insurance. And then it was 5, and that wasn't an issue.
For your 40 years, the city is bound to do that.
Right. No, they didn't, and they didn't. And I had no problem with that change, because I think it was only fair that that was equal. But I sure would fight, and I did fight for my sick leave, because there was a need, and I was told I couldn't use it for that need, and I won. So sick leave is a very important part of a person's employment. And if they've been told, and they get a policy book that says this is what you have. You may not sign a contract, but you have a policy book that gets changed and updated periodically, then that's telling me this is what I should be getting. So I think, I hope that explains some of it even further, Alderman Jettie, and I'm not trying to contradict you, Mayor, I'm trying to, how we came to looking at that, how we were going to give that.
That while these people had earned a certain amount up to 2001, they'd been working under a certain system and were promised it, they'd earned that. So what the amendment, what the proposal before the committee did was recognize what had been earned as of the date of the change, and then going forward for the unearned severance,
Trying to give them,
allowed,
something back.
recognize the city's change in the formula.
right, okay.
Right.
Thank you. Alderman Lopez, would you like to speak
you.
on that? You're
So the
welcome.
amendment, I didn't actually stipulate exactly. All I did was incorporate the proposal that had been made by the Human Affairs Committee, or what I forget the name of the review board, and was presented in public comment by Commissioner Tollner. I literally stated in the minutes to say, why don't we add the option after it had come to our attention that some of the employees were accumulating larger amounts than 720 hours because they were planning on using it as an alternative to paying for short-term disability, and that created a hardship for them. So some employees would want to take a lower cash out so that they could accrue a larger protective amount of sick time, and some employees might want to just say, I'm going to get the 720 and I'll take all 100% of it, and I'm happy with that. So all I had said in the meeting was we should offer the option. I don't see anything that changes that. All they did was add in bold that option. They didn't say from this point onwards now they can accrue everything to 100%, because the original proposal didn't say that either. The amendment that we originally talked about in the board here didn't say only the accrual at the time of the change. It doesn't reference that. So I don't think that we changed as much as is being represented here. I also heard the argument characterized as indifference towards employees who have already quit, which I think is grossly unfair, because in truth, we care about all of the employees and what was done to them, and would like to make some amends for as many as possible. But the argument being presented here is that if we try to help anybody, then we're hurting everybody. We're insulting the people who aren't going to get the benefit by helping people who could still get it. If there's a proposal to give everybody the benefit, I would encourage the mayor to make it. But I think a step we can take right now is to acknowledge the active employees who have a claim to that right just because they were offered it at their time of hiring, and that was the understanding they were operating under, the choice. Because most of them are likely to pick the pre-existing choice. Now, the case was made for this amendment basically on one employee coming forward and saying that this affected him negatively and adversely. This has happened before, where the changes to the merit plan have impacted employees. The employees have come forward, and then there have been meetings in the background, and the employees are no longer coming forward. But we're being told everything's fine and everything's okay. I don't know whether to believe that, because we don't have the employee here. We don't have Director Boudreau here. We don't have even Attorney Bolton here. We just have the mayor. So my gut tells me that if somebody knows their own system or their own needs and their own situations and what is best for them, they're not necessarily just going to cash out and take the largest benefit. It may be that they're looking for more flexibility in their own living situation. And that's because that's what was being asked for. While the employee who came forward was later apparently of the opinion that, oh, I guess I could just retire and take my money. That's not what we wanted him to do, or any of them to do. We want them to keep working for the city. And if they want the flexibility, as they have worked for the city for many, many years, to have an alternative if they get sick for a long period of time to leaving the city, that's not a terrible idea. That gives us the ability to retain employees as they continue to age, but continue to accrue experience, not just benefits. And a lot of these employees are in fairly senior positions. Not all of them actually have over 1,000 hours. In fact, most of them don't even have over 700. So I can't imagine why they would choose the amendment, but it doesn't actually say that automatically everybody gets one thing, automatically everybody gets another, and throws the baby out with the bathwater. So if the board is willing, I'd like to quickly read the amendment as it was amended.
Does anyone have any objection?
First of all, I have not talked to any of these people personally because I have not wanted to seem like they're under any pressure in any respect. The guy who came in, I've not heard it from him directly. He didn't really realize what the committee was considering. And for whatever reason he expressed, I've heard that he says, oh, well, then the committee the committee version, the version that was before the committee originally, hey, that's fine with me. But I've not heard that directly. It's only a second or third hand, and that's it.
Alderman Wilshire.
You know, Mayor, you keep bringing up the fact that this happened 17 years ago. Well, it did happen 17 years ago, but it also happened in March that we reversed this for some employees. That's where I'm coming from. We did it for some.
I do say it just because but I see a difference. Because they expressed a management imperative, and it's the fire department. What are we going to do? We're, make it so they can't promote the people. So that seemed like worth doing, at least to those who were working on that merit legislation. I do bring up the 17 years only because it's so long ago. Like, come on, it's not like it was last year. It was 17 years ago. Who was even mayor then? I guess it was early in Bernie Streeter's tenure. But we've gone through all of these years, decades, and nothing, no one's changed it. After a certain period of time, I'm just expressing my opinion. It's just better to leave things the way they are.
Okay. Alderman Wilshire.
But we did change it. We changed it in March.
For that fire department employee, yes.
And I don't begrudge the fire department getting that. I begrudge the other people who aren't getting it. So we didn't just, out of the blue, just say 17 years later, we're going to make this change. We made this decision because it came up in March and because some people got it and others didn't.
Okay. All right. I know, Mayor, that you have to leave, and I appreciate you staying. I think the committee still has some discussion concerning this and where we go from here, and I appreciate that. I guess we have to look at, do we go with the amendment? Do we go back to the original? How do we do this so that we feel that we have done something for those employees? And Alderman Lopez, I don't want you to think that those people who have retired are not worthy, but I think that they knew when they left that this is what they were going to get. And so if they felt that things could have changed for them prior to that, I think that they would have or could have or should have.
The privilege, because this is like the third time someone has visited that here. That's not what I believe at all. I believe we should have done this fairly for everybody, but I accept the reality that we're not likely to persuade the board, the mayor, and everybody involved that we should do it for everybody. So I think we should be helping the people that are active employees right now because there's a stronger argument for doing that. That has nothing to do with the people who are already
Thank you.
retired.
Okay, thank you. I think that people will understand that a lot better. Okay.
So I
Any
gotta
other
leave, but I would
questions to
just
the
close
mayor?
with, no matter what we do, someone's going to say it. No matter what the city
Absolutely.
does,
And that's like
someone is
anything.
going to see it as unfair. So there's no perfect solution. I've told you what I think. Alderman Wilshire has made clear what she thinks, and I can see the logic of that. And it's just not,
And we can't make
it's not a
everyone
situation
happy.
where the perfect solution, but I do feel fairly strongly on what I have articulated. That's it. All right?
Thank you, Mayor, for
All right, thank you.
coming.
If you
Okay.
need anything else, let us know.
And you're not going to be here for the appointments?
No,
Ms. Kleiner will be?
because I have to go to another thing. and,
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Klein
All
is
right.
going to be here for all of the all of the very worthy people who are going to be coming before
As
you.
always, thank you.
Some wonderful people.
Yes. Okay. So can we have more discussion on
Make an observation.
R 18-060? But please make note that Alderman Gidge has arrived at 6:50.
So
Thank
noted.
you. Alderman Lopez.
I just feel like it's pragmatic to move forward with the amendment that we added previously, because should that not reach full board approval, in terms of process, we can just fall back to the original proposition. So if we can't, as aldermen, decide that we want to give the choice to the larger group of people, there's still the opportunity to vote on the baseline support that the mayor has endorsed for the few. So I'd rather we vote for the whole thing, and I think this body should recommend final passage of the amended version. But in terms of procedure, Madam President, Clerk, I believe we would vote on that in order to take it off the table, to vote for it as amended, and if that should fail, then vote on the
Any
the
changes?
ordinance, the resolution itself, right? So it seems like the straightest path right now is to just go with the resolution that was actually written by legal and HR after I made a glib comment and they turned it into an actual piece, so.
So are you making a motion for final passage of, oh, no, let me just, can you hold? Yeah.
There's a motion on the table for final passage of this resolution.
Right, I'm just,
As
yeah,
amended.
and I was just
As
verifying
amended.
it. As amendment, that's the one that was amended
So my
on
motion is
10-1.
to amend it and make that recommendation. Alderman Wilshire's is to make a motion, I believe, for the original version of it.
Okay, well, let's
That
go
wasn't
for,
my intent. My intent, I'll withdraw that motion.
okay. So, okay, so just to clarify, the amendment, the motion by Alderman Lopez is for final passage of the proposed amendments made to R-18-066 as amended on 10-1-28. Okay, right? Alderman Lopez, is
I
that
believe
right?
that's correct, yeah.
Okay, so do we have any discussion on that? Alderman Gidge?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Is this amendment that we will be voting on, is there anything that you can see in the future that may hurt what we're trying to do overall? Or do you think this amendment is solid enough to go forth?
I wouldn't vote for it if I thought it was bad.
It's,
I
the
usually don't make people
recommendation is,
speechless.
the recommendation is for, the change in the amendment is giving those 8 or 10 people a choice.
I can read it if we want.
If you'd like, Alderman Lopez will read it, but it's
No.
basically to cover those 8 or 10 people, and it gives them a choice.
That's fine.
Okay, Alderman Kelly, Alderwoman Kelly,
Thank you.
sorry.
I fully support the amended version of this. I think we've talked about this a lot. We've looked at it many different ways, and I think ultimately boiling it down is, are we going to go back to do something that was unfair to a number of people and make it right for them? And as President Wilshire has pointed out, we've made it right for other people. And I think it's fair to restore it for the people who have not made it right.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. You have all that? Okay, so we'll vote on R-18-066 as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the resolution has passed as amended. Okay, that's only one. Okay. Now we're on to communication. Oh, no, shall we go back to our? Yeah, we gotta go back to interviews, okay. Okay, so we will now start with the interviews. Ms. Kleiner? We are looking for Brian Law from the Airport Authority. Is Mr. Law here? Thank you, yeah.
See,
No, have a seat. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Ms. Kleiner,
Good evening.
thank you.
Mayor Donchis is very pleased to move forward Mr. Brian Law for the Airport Authority. Mr. Law needs no introduction, a longtime member of our community and well-respected businessman. He does have a lot of experience with his business next to the airport and with being active in the airport growing up in the community. So Mayor Donchis thanks Mr. Law for stepping forward for this very important role.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Law, would you like to speak to the committee?
I appreciate the opportunity to be involved in the Airport Authority. Having grown up in Nashua, my uncle was a B-52 pilot, and he introduced me to flying here in Nashua by coming to Nashua and taking us up. And I learned to fly, but never actually got my license, but unfortunately. But now I get to give back and still stay involved with aviation by being involved in what I think is a great asset for the city of Nashua. So I really appreciate the opportunity to try and bring some of my real estate experience, as well as my logistics background on the trucking warehousing side of the world to the Airport Authority and help make it a great gem for the city.
Alderwoman Kelly.
I wanted to say thank you for stepping forward. You have quite an interesting background. I saw the hot air pilot.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting. And of course, you went to BU, so I'm a
right.
fan. But just thank you. I know it's a lot of hours to put into this stuff, and it's important to have people who.
This will be fun. This will be fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's nice to see that you're passionate about it.
Thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
I appreciate your background in working with the Boys and Girls Club, working with the Rotary. It seems like you're very focused on what's best for Nashua, how to help, how to be involved. So I'm in favor of that, and I appreciate you coming forward. I just wanted to know if you have seen the new mural over at Midfield, or
Part of it. Part of it.
it's in process.
Yes, it's in process, yes. My brother and I go there for breakfast. Being fifth-generation business, we like to get away, and we go every 2 weeks we go there for breakfast, so it's a great little spot.
The old one was done by Barbara Andrews, who did a really great job, but it's a kitchen, so grease and life happens. And now it's being updated by Manny Ramirez, so I happen to see snapshots as it unfolds.
Yeah, it's great.
Anyone else? Alderman Wilshire?
I don't have any questions, but thank you for stepping forward. I think you'll be a great addition to the Airport Authority.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do too, and thank you for volunteering to be part of the City of Nashua's volunteer community. Thank you. We will be discussing all nominations at the end of the meeting.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Would you like me to stay to the end in case there are more questions, or how's that work?
You can, it's totally up to
Okay. All right.
Okay, so now for the Citizens Advisory Commission for Community Grants, Elizabeth Hood. Ms. Kleiner?
Well, although I'd love to introduce Ms. Hood, this is, I believe, Alderman McCarthy's appointment from the board, so I will give to President Wilshire.
Well, thank you very much. I happen to know Betsy Hood, known Betsy for 26, 27 years. She's the former director of the Youth Council and worked prior to that at Nashua Children's Home. That's how I know Betsy. Will be a wonderful addition to the community, Citizens Advisory Community Grants Committee.
And I too had spoken to former Alderman Brian McCarthy, we had a conversation because he couldn't figure out who to put on there and who was the best. And I know that, I know Betsy too for a long time. We worked on some projects together, so I think she'll be a great addition to the CAC, or former Review and Comment
I
Committee.
keep calling it
I-
review
me
and comment, I
too.
just can't get past it. I
Me
don't know
too.
why.
So now it's your turn.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
For many of you who know me, I was the executive director of the Youth Council over the last 22 years and left there to work for Southern New Hampshire Health back in August. And when I heard there was an opening for an additional Nashua resident to serve as a volunteer, thought that would be just a wonderful way to give back to the community. I understand how nonprofit works, the challenges of, budgeting and tracking outcomes. And I also, in my role at Southern, am also in charge of sponsoring community organizations. So thinking that would be just an incredibly helpful connection to bring to the committee should you choose to appoint me.
Great. Any questions from the committee? Alderman Lopez.
Well, so I'm familiar with Betsy from her years at the Youth Council, her involvement in other projects, particularly substance use disorder prevention programs and treatment programs. So I'm pretty enthusiastic about her appointment as well. I would like to point out that Southern New Hampshire Health Services has now racked up 2 representatives on there. I believe there's another employee there too. So that's just something to be conscious of. But I know that with Betsy's background and deep roots in the community, she's likely to fulfill my priorities for that committee, which are particularly paying attention to the needs of smaller organizations and their role within the community. Because I think it can be very easy for us to overlook the smaller organizations because the larger ones are so much bigger and more visible. Well, the smaller ones are the ones who really need the support of the city to continue meeting niches that the city could otherwise not fill as effectively.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Betsy, for willing to join this group, and I look forward to working with you in January. Thank you. Okay, we have the Downtown Improvement Committee, Stephen Sachs.
Take that seat too.
This is the best seat in the house.
It is the best seat.
Everybody gets to be Brian Laws for a couple hours. Brandon Laws. Ooh, that's interesting.
Okay, Ms. Kleiner.
Good evening. Mayor Donches is very pleased to nominate Stephen Sachs for the Downtown Improvement Committee. Mr. Sachs has been in business development at Alpha Graphics downtown for a number of years. He's also chairman of the board of PAL, for those of you that are familiar with the Police Athletic League, and has lived in Nashua for many, many years. Mr. Sachs has been very active in helping out the mayor's office and local government, so we are happy to nominate him for this role as well.
Great. Mr. Sachs, what you bring to our Downtown Improvement Committee?
Being in business downtown, we love downtown. I've been in the business environment in Nashua since 1986, opening up the Pheasant Lane Mall, and I just love the city, and I love downtown, and I think I can be an asset to the committee.
Any questions? Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you. I was really pleasantly surprised to see your name come up. I see you downtown all the time. And I appreciate all of the history that you have to bring to this role. I would like to know, and I always ask this question to people who want to do Downtown Improvement Committee, but I'd like to know, like, one thing that you would like to see happen that the downtown doesn't currently have that you would like to see.
The identification of the parking areas. I mean, signage.
Okay.
I still can't find a parking lot.
Likely stuck in a print house somewhere.
Good answer.
Alderman Lopez?
I just wanted to comment that in my interactions with Steve through many, many nonprofits over the years, I found his business to be very, very generous in supporting smaller groups, smaller activities. Promotion is everything. Telling people that you're actually having an event means that they know to come to it, and it can be very encouraging to the people who are running it. And that's a great booster for people who are trying to get involved, because it can be discouraging to run an event and then have nobody show up, not because of the merits of the event, but because you just didn't have the right mechanism for doing it. So I think Steve's business experience tells him to help out the little guy, and help them, become a wave of activity and energy and enthusiasm that everyone has commented on downtown. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Jim.
And I also want to recognize his participation with Nashua PAL. And so I guess that's where my question is do you think we can do more to engage youth downtown in youth-focused activities? It seems like we have the young professional adult crowd kind of locked in, but not
Yes,
much for youth.
where I think we need more time and more involvement is with kids that are 12 and over. These seem to be, I'll use the word neglected, as opposed to the younger children in our community.
Overlooked, maybe?
Overlooked, thank you. And at PAL, I know we're working to work closer with the older group of kids and get them more involved in the community.
And I would say, to PAL's credit, they are running the best downtown activity for kids over at St. Patrick's with the basketball gym and cheerleading practices and that kind of stuff. And I would like to see more youth-friendly activity, because as the alderman representing it, I literally hear a lot of times, there's a lot of teenagers riding their bikes downtown. And I'm like, what? Of all the things to be worried about, you're upset that you know where they are and that they're safe?
Yeah, we currently run 16 to 18 different programs, from computer science to all the athletics. And again, most of the engagement is with the 8 to 11 or 12 years old, and we have to make that next step to get to the older kids in our
Even in the
community.
gym, I thought that was a slightly older crowd.
The gym is different. Yeah, it is an older crowd. And we have a new floor in the gym.
Yeah, it looks amazing in there. For anybody who's watching, check out the St. Patrick's Gym. PAL is really, that's a demonstration of a very, very, very solid partnership with the church and with PAL. And they have a lot of other youth programs too, like the Boy Scouts that are active out of there. If you can ever get a boxing match down there, I would go.
We're having one coming up in the spring, and it may be there.
All right, all right.
Anyone else? Well, we thank you for volunteering to sit on this committee, and your nomination will be voted on later on in the meeting.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Have a wonderful
you.
evening.
Thank you. And then we have, also from downtown, is David Grabowski. Hopefully I said that right? Grabowski?
Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, Ms. Kleiner, you're up.
So part of Mayor Donches's focus on the Downtown Improvement Committee has been to bring local small business owners onto the committee. There has been some great movement in how we move the downtown forward that comes from our local small business owners. So he's very pleased that Mr. Grabowski has stepped forward as an alternate new appointment to the committee. He is the owner of Faye's Fine Cabinetry downtown, as well as a resident of Nashua. He has served in a number of different roles around the community, serving on the board of the Nashua Soup Kitchen, the Nashua Community College, and the Deering Lake Improvement Association. So Mayor Donches thanks Mr. Grabowski for stepping forward.
Anything to add?
No, I'm just very excited to be even considered for this position. And, as both a citizen of Nashua and a business owner downtown, I recognize the importance of trying to create a vibrant, healthy community, and hope to be able to contribute, through my business experience as well as my experience having come and brought my family to Nashua. To help balance the needs and the wants of the Nashua citizens, as well as trying to attract visitors and more commerce to greater downtown Nashua.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Alderman Lopez.
Just curious where Deering Lake is.
Where? Do you know where is?
Oh, it's where.
Just
I was
beyond
confused
there.
by the
Yep.
answer. All right.
Anyone else? All right, thank you for volunteering to sit on this committee, and your nomination will be voted on towards the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So Energy and Environment Committee, James Pyle.
So Mr. Pyle actually contacted our office quite a while ago. He has been very interested in serving on our Energy and Environment Committee. Especially this is under the Community Development Direction, and he has been attending meetings there and working with them. He has, as you can see, on the information provided to you, he has some interest in solar and community solar. He also holds a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering. Mayor Dontress met with him and was very impressed with his ideas. So Mayor Dontress thanks him very much for coming forward to serve on the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Pyle. And why would you want to be on a committee like this?
Very pleased the city has such a committee.
It's new.
I'm a proponent of renewable energy and clean energy. I've got an electric vehicle. I'd like to have solar panels on my house, but that's another issue. So I was very pleased to find that the city has this committee, and I would like to help this committee investigate some of the possibilities for the city using clean energy. So things like electrical vehicle stations, charging stations, solar panels on public buildings, things like that I'm interested in seeing what we can do with the city.
Okay. Alderman Lopez, he had his hand up
So I
first.
saw a cartoon over the weekend with a picture of Santa Claus looking at this big coal churning city saying like, maybe I shouldn't have given all the bad children coal when they were younger. So my question is, what about youth outreach? And like, I know I grew up with the solar car challenge, build your own solar car and stuff. What about, do you see a role in the committee for advocating for or raising awareness of those activities?
During the summer, the committee had a Solarized Nashua campaign, and we had a booth at the farmer's market, and we got all sorts of people, young or older. And I had a small display with a solar panel and a propeller, and it attracted the kids. It's a good idea to attract the youth, and possibly something through the school systems advocating solar power would be a great idea.
Thank you.
Alderman Kelly.
I just would like to point out that I am on the Energy and Environment Committee, and it's pretty amazing, so. Just had to say that. I'm one of the people who want to be on that committee, so I appreciate.
Very renewing.
It's very renewing. I appreciate you stepping forward. I think it's a critical time for these kinds of actions, especially given the reports we've been getting about climate change and how soon that's going to be coming down and affecting people here. I love your list of concerns. I think I've been struggling with where do we start because it feels like a big thing. So I was wondering, like, what would be your first step? What's the one thing you'd like to see happen in like your first year?
I would love to see solar panels on some public building, the library, the landfill, something visible. And I think that would encourage others to say, hey, this is doable. I can do it, and we can help, reduce the air pollution, reduce the energy demands. The technology is here today. We just need to use it.
I agree.
We do have the most popular bench in Nashua where you can charge your phone with a solar panel.
I do.
Anyone else? Oh, Alderman Jettie.
I'm not on the committee, but
That's okay.
I was impressed to hear you talk about you're having an electric car and that you want to advocate for more charging stations. I've had some of my constituents complain to me that there are not enough of them around. So anything that you can do to make that happen would be a great benefit to the city.
We have one in the parking garage, and it shuts off at 6 o'clock when the parking meters end. So I'd love to see those hours extended and see more around the city.
As I understand it, the one in the parking garage is not city-run either. I think it's private.
Oh, okay.
Okay, anyone else? Well, we thank you for volunteering to come sit on that committee, and we will vote on your nomination shortly. Thank you. So Planning Board, Maggie Hopper.
Members of the committee, Ms. Harper's no stranger. She's been in front of you before. She has been serving on the planning board as an alternate. We first met Ms. Harper when she went through the city's academy up in the auditorium 2 years ago. And she stepped forward after that and has been volunteering in the city. And we are thankful that she is willing to step forward now with the new opening to become a full member of the planning board.
Thank you. Ms. Harper, would you like to speak?
Sure.
Thank you.
I've been a Nashua for over 35 years now, and I love the city. And when the academy became available, I was really excited and actually learned a lot about all the different departments here. When the opportunity came up to become an alternate on the planning board, again, I was really excited. And the last year, I've enjoyed it a lot. I've actually learned a lot about that process, and hopefully looking forward to being a part of that process going forward.
Okay. Any questions? Alderman Wilshire?
I don't have a question, just want to thank you for your willingness to
thank
serve.
you.
I know the planning board can have some pretty late meetings and long hours, so thank you for your willingness to come forward as a full member.
Oh, you're welcome.
Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, I too thank you for your willingness. The planning board is very important.
Yes.
And I think it's important that, I applaud the people who are willing to spend the time serving on things like the planning board and the zoning board of adjustment. But I think we owe it to the citizens that the people who serve on those boards take their jobs very seriously, and that they commit themselves to taking advantage of the training that's offered and learning the laws and about how planning boards should operate. And I hope that it sounds like you have already dedicated yourself to that, and I hope and encourage you to continue to seek more education about the functions of the planning board and the laws, the state laws that govern that, so that our citizens know that the planning board is making its decisions in accordance with the law and fair to all parties.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Harper, for
you.
volunteering, and we'll take up your nomination shortly.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next group is for the Tax Increment Financing Advisory Board. And the first one is Michael Serrato? Serrato, I'm sorry. As long as you're not late for dinner. Okay, Ms. Kleiner.
Members of the committee, so Mayor Donchis, working with Director Cummings, has put together the next few appointments for the Tax Increment Financing Advisory Board. We know that this is a very important board, and these candidates all bring something very unique in their different ways to the board. Mr. Serrato owns the Serrato Group, which does financial and investment management. That's one of his specialties. He's also a member of the National Community, now living just outside in Hollis, but he's been a member of the National Rotary, Home and Hospice Board, Boys and Girls Club, and the Adult Learning Center. So he's been well vested in the national community and holds the specialty in financial and investment management.
Thank you. Your turn.
My turn.
Your turn.
I've started my career in downtown Nashua about 35 years ago, and I've been in a 3-block radius my entire career. So I'd like to think I've been my dedication to downtown has strong. I own a couple commercial buildings in downtown, one of which I have my practice in, and both of them are on the waterfront. So the TIF area encompasses that. And I don't know a lot about the TIF workings yet because I haven't been part of the committee, but I'm really looking forward to be part of that because I think downtown is finally getting their feet under them and beginning to get the growth going that for years and years have just stalled. And I'm excited about it, and I really appreciate and I'm flattered by the opportunity.
Great. Any questions? Alderman Lopez.
I would say if anybody has their pulse on downtown, it's you, having been through the ups and the downs and all that kind of stuff. Personally, I'm a huge fan of owner-occupied dwelling management. So I think by having somebody who's so invested in the area that the TIF district is going to be in, where we're going to have on-the-ground insight, knowledge, and I'm looking forward to your contribution.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderman Wilshire.
I'd like to thank you for coming forward. We always,
pleasure.
it's always nice to have somebody who, is vested in the downtown and step forward and give us your expertise on this committee, so thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm really excited about it.
Yes, thank you. You sound like you're going to be a great addition to this group, and your nomination will be taken up
Great.
shortly.
Thank you. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
And next up is Chris Lewis.
So, members of the committee, Mayor Donchis is happy to bring forward Christopher Lewis for the appointment to the Tax Increment Financing Advisory Board. Many of you may know, looking at his resume, he's in architectural and design leadership. And then if you've looked further down, you see that he has been with Brady Sullivan in our new development over on Franklin Street. So Mr. Lewis is well prepared on what is happening in our local downtown, as well as having experience in development and design.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, would you like to?
Yes.
speak? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. I have 20 years of experience in architectural design, and when the appointment opportunity came up from the mayor's office, I was thrilled at the opportunity, and we've done a lot of development along the river's edge already, and I'm excited about bringing more possible design opportunities along that front and any others that might come this way. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, I stuck my hand up. Sorry about that. I should really let
That's
the
all right.
candidate put his hand up. I just got excited when I read about the mill design, and I would just want to comment. I think it's going to be a really good background because as an architect, you get to design what's in the space, and this is going to be an opportunity to better incorporate and include it. We have some really, really effective mill designs in the downtown area that are designed internally, but not necessarily integrated in the space around them. So I'm looking forward to seeing how your knowledge and background is going to contribute to that. Also, if you wanted to donate a $1 million project, we're working on redoing a shoe store. Just put it out there.
Alderman
I'd
Lopez.
love to be part of it.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your willingness to sit on this committee, and your appointment will be taken up shortly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we have Tia Phillips.
Members of the committee, many of you may know Ms. Phillips. She is the senior property manager over at Clock Tower Place and has been very active in our community. Mayor Donchis is very thrilled to bring her forward for the Tax Increment Financing Advisory Board as well. She's an active member of the Board of Directors for the Mill Yard Associates and previously served on the Board of Directors for the Great American Downtown. She's very familiar with downtown Nashua as well as the properties and investments in the area.
Thank you. Ms. Phillips?
I'm very pleased to be asked to be on the committee. I do feel like I'm very, very familiar with downtown. As was mentioned, I've been at Clock Tower for 20 years. I also have a supervisory capacity over at Cotton Mill, which is managed, Cotton Mill Apartments, which is managed by the same management company, both of which I believe are in the area for the financing advisory committee.
Any questions? Alderman Kelly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I remember you welcoming me to the city way back when I got here. A lot of my friends have gone through the starting clock tower and then buy a house kind of thing. So my question to you would be, I think that is a story that I've heard from a lot of people. What would you like to see happen for that sort of younger generation who come in and kind of are welcomed to downtown through clock tower?
Well, I think it's through Clock Tower, and there are a lot of other housing opportunities there now. There's Clock Tower, there's Cotton Mill, there's, Brady Sullivan. It's nice that we have people in the community that think fondly of their Clock Tower, experience. I'm not really sure. We really enjoy what we do in property management and being active in the downtown area and the committee and the community. Kind of outreaching. I love Main Street. I love downtown. Just continuation of what we have been doing.
Okay, Alderman Lopez.
Kind of to play off Alderman Kelly's observation, downtown isn't just north-south, it's also east-west. And I think with all the new housing developments that are all in close proximity to each other, it'd be really interesting to see kind of collaboration happening. I'm particularly excited by the last three, nominees for the TIF committee. There's a lot of possibility for interplay there that is really, really exciting. So Tia, your experience and your background is known. Like you're almost like iconic downtown, like to the point where somebody maybe made a giant Lego head. Very well known. As for what Shoshana has said, it's because you've been welcoming to a great number of people coming in through Clock Tower, and you've been involved in Great American Downtown and other projects. And you can just show up for work every day, or you can really be engaging and do it well and make a welcoming place. And I think that's what we want to see with the people who are passionate, enthusiastic about downtown. Is you're not just showing up there every day. You're making people feel welcome. You're thinking outside the box. You're creating things. And I think Clock Tower is very successful, largely in part because of your leadership. And I'm looking forward to what you can do too on the TIF.
I appreciate that. That's those comments are very kind. I would like to say that I am not native to Nashua. I came here about 25 years ago, and Nashua has been very welcoming to me. So I'm glad to be able to kind of give back. So,
Anyone else? Alderman Wilshire.
I agree that Tia Phillips is iconic downtown. I mean, everybody knows Tia, right? Everybody who's downtown knows Tia. Thank you so much for everything you do and your willingness to step forward for this. Really appreciate it.
thank you for the consideration.
You bet.
No one else. Thank you. We'll take up your nomination shortly. Last but not least, Zoning Board of Adjustment, Mr. Mancara. Hi, Jay. Okay, Ms. Kleiner.
Okay, I'm not sure I need to introduce here because I think everyone
Some of us know him.
knows who Mr. Mankara is. He's not only been with the city of Nashua before, but now he serves as our Nashua Regional Planning Commission Executive Director. I think Mayor Donchis was really looking very seriously at the Zoning Board of Adjustment and who he would bring forward in this alternate position, knowing that we'd like to see people in the alternate positions, eventually move forward, and he's looking for very strong board members. And when Mr. Mankara agreed to take it, we were thrilled. And so we're very excited with all of his background and his experience to have him serve our city.
Thank you. Jay, your turn.
Thank you. I've been a resident of the city of Nashua now, I realize, for about 32 years. And most of that time I've spent working in planning and economic development, both for the city as well as surrounding towns. I've staffed planning boards and zoning boards and written master plans and ordinances and regulations. I even served as a zoning administrator for a while, but I've never actually sat on a board. So I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to sit on the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I recognize that it plays a critical role in the community. So it'd be great to be a part of that and to give back to the community.
Alderman Wilshire.
Hi, Jay. I don't have a question, but how did we get so lucky to get you? I mean, that's all I can say. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, I have to say, from my years of working on resumes, yours would have been very hard because there's just so many factually impressive things. It's hard to pack it all into a page. So not only do you have an amazing career, but you managed to put it great on a paper. I particularly was zeroing in on the master plan experience that you have. I know we really, really need one and that we've been pushing for it. And I also know that a lot of the tension on the zoning board is coming because we don't have a firm master plan. So there needs to be a lot of exceptions, variances, et cetera. So do you have any inclination, aspirations, advice on that other than just find the money and get it going?
Definitely find the money and get it going,
Okay.
for sure.
Totally
But,
invited
you know, I think, it is the foundation for all the ordinances, the regulations that we have. And so it is critical, it is vital. So I do hope it moves forward. And I hope it's a really open and inclusive process so that we can hear a lot of voices as it's being put together.
Can I just ask one follow-up?
Alderman Lopez.
Thanks. Do you have opinions on form-based code and whether it's applicable in Nashua?
I do.
We'll hold those for another day.
Anyone
No,
else?
I'd be happy to speak to that if you
don't mind. Yeah.
No, not at all. I mean, I think that form-based codes offer really a lot of opportunities. I don't think you can apply them necessarily in every context. You do need a combination, in my view, of use regulations, but as well as form-based regulations. But I do think they offer a lot of promise, and it's something I would certainly encourage the city to explore.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderman Jettie.
So as a matter of full disclosure, I spoke to Jay this afternoon about his coming on board. I too think that we are very fortunate that he is willing to serve on the Zoning Board of Adjustment. But would you mind sharing with us your view as to what you see the role of the Zoning Board of Adjustment being compared to the Planning Board, compared to the zoning ordinance and the Board of Aldermen?
So I see each of the different boards as having very, very distinct role. So as we were alluding to earlier, the master plan is really the foundation of our local land use regulations. That is, the planning board initiates it and forms it. The planning board then has the role of course, again, with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, or the Board of Aldermen, adopting our ordinances and regulations or making the recommendations. The aldermen are the legislative body, so they're adopting the ordinances. The role of the zoning board is really threefold. It's granting special exceptions as defined in the ordinance under the criteria. In some cases, taking appeals of administrative decisions, so that's the interpretive role. And then on those uncommon circumstances where the application of the zoning strictly to a particular property induces hardship for that owner, then in granting variances. So I do view it is a quasi-judicial role. I think it's extremely important, but it's not the role of the zoning board to substitute its own interpretation of the law. Well, I shouldn't say the interpretation of the law, to what they think the law ought to be. If we disagree, if a member of a zoning board disagrees with a particular ordinance or regulation, you could maybe voice that in a different context, but it's not your role to change the law, to overturn the law. It's your role to interpret the law. And in my view, what you want to do is, the most important role is to administer it fairly and consistently.
Thank you. Well, I welcome your participation on the board.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Hi, Jay. Nice to see you again.
See you.
Thank you so much for willing to step in and be part of what is a very complicated board. Planning, zoning, those are time-consuming, and so we're looking forward to your expertise on that. And your nomination will come up shortly. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Ms. Kleiner. Okay. So you had communication.
We have a communication from Dorothy Clark, Deputy Corporation Counsel, regarding proposed amendment to Resolution 18073, legislation proposing a city charter amendment regarding the filing of elected vacancies.
So there being no objection, I would like to accept the communication and place it on file.
We have another communication from Kim Kleiner, Chief of Staff, Office of the Mayor. If that's where it is, we've already accepted
We
that. I'm
did do
sorry.
that. No, that's okay. Thank you. Okay. Applications to license hawkers, peddlers, vendors.
None.
Okay. Appointments by the mayor.
I would make a motion to recommend the confirmation of the following appointments by the mayor. Brian H. Law to the Airport Authority for a term to expire August 31st, 2023. Steve Sachs and Dave Grabowski to the Downtown Improvement Committee for terms to expire September 13th, 2019. And December 1st, 2021. James Pyle to the Energy and Environment Committee for a term to expire October 31st, 2021. Greg Andruskevich to the Mine Falls Park Advisory Committee for a term to expire June 30th, 2020. Just, the people that are listed on here that haven't come, it's because the board didn't ask them to come before us?
Right, because
Okay.
they, right.
Reappointments, yeah.
Okay.
They're just reappointments.
Sorry, I'm fairly new to the Personnel Committee. So we'll go back to Sylvia Gale to the Cultural Connections Committee for a term to expire February 28th, 2021. Tina Cassidy, Tracy Hall, and Lindsay Rinaldi to the National Arts Commission for terms to expire September 1st, 2021 and April 1st, 2021. Paul DeShanes to the National Housing Authority for a term to expire October 13th, 2023. Maggie Harper to the Nashua City Planning Board for a term to expire March 31st, 2020. Michael Serrato, Chris Lewis, and Tia Phillips to the Tax Increment Financing Advisory Board for terms to expire September 30th, 2019. And Jay Mancara to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for a term to expire September 11th, 2020.
Do we have any questions or comments? Alderman Jettie.
Did you say Greg
Andruskevich. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You did? Okay.
Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Appointments by the President of the Board of Aldermen.
I'll make a motion to recommend the confirmation of Elizabeth G. Hood to the Citizens Advisory Commission for Community Grants for a term to expire October 1st, 2021.
Okay. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Unfinished business resolutions.
Resolution 18073, proposing an amendment to the city charter relative to filling vacancies on elected boards by a majority vote of the remaining members of that board. I will make a motion to amend Resolution 18073 by replacing it with the proposed amendments attached to Attorney Clark's memo accepted earlier this evening.
Did you have a chance to review? Any questions? Alderman Kelly.
For the benefit of the public, and can we just talk through quickly what that changes and what was found? Because I'm on the committee and it's a little confusing.
Okay, so Miss Piazza is here from the city clerk's office, and she has kindly stayed so that she could give you
does
that
not have to stay
update
as
on
Mr.
to
President.
the amendments. Yes, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and honorable committee members.
Thank you.
So what transpired was, in doing some research, I found a resolution that unfortunately fell by the wayside back in 2011, Resolution 11-139, which was a amendment to the charter. And the addition in the vacancy for the office of Alderman, Public Works, Board of Fire Commissioners, and Board of Public Works was that the sentence, provided, however, that if the Board of Aldermen determines that the vacancy shall be filled on the date of the next regularly scheduled municipal election, the vacancy shall not be filled by a special election. Instead, the candidate who receives the most votes at the regular municipal election for the next term of office, which is then vacant, and who is not then an incumbent member of the board, shall be sworn in to complete the unexpired term as soon as the results are final. So that resolution passed back in August of 2011, went before the voters, who approved it at the November 8, 2011 election. And for some reason, it fell through the cracks, and the charter that was online was not updated. It has since now been updated. So that's why this amendment is now coming through, is to put the language that should have been in there back in 2011.
Alderman Kelly? Do you have anything?
Do I look like I have a question?
Yes.
I didn't raise my hand, but, okay, so just to clarify, the piece that was missing basically says if there's a vacancy, we can fill it at the next municipal election instead of holding a special one.
That will be up to the board's decision, correct?
Okay.
Any other board members, committee members? No. Okay. Alderman Jettie and then Alderman Gathright. Alderman Jettie?
So, what you just talked about, the part that didn't get into the online version of the charter, would allow like what happened with Alderman Tenza. There was a vacancy, there was an already scheduled election, and so instead of waiting, it allowed him to take office immediately because he was the highest vote getter for the position of Alderman at large.
Okay.
So he could replace Alderman Dean right away.
Alderman Jettie, relative to Alderman Tenza is coming onto the board, his position, that position was less than 6 months in a day, so it was less than 6 months. So that's how that vacancy is filled currently under the charter. If it's less than 6 months, it is automatically the highest vote getter who's not a current sitting alderman would receive that position for that term, for that unexpired term. This would be for 6 months and a day.
Yeah, may I?
Yes.
My first question isn't what the proposal is. My first question is what the resolution that got dropped inadvertently, what did that do?
That changed the policy the way it would have been for if it was 6 months and a day. So it states here that if it's 6 months and 1 day, you would have that choice to continue to set the, not call a special election, but have it filled by a vacancy at the next election. Alderman Tenzer came in with under 6 months. That's how it currently is, under 6 months. This would have then gave the board authorization to go ahead and do it if it's more than 6 months and 1 day remaining.
So as things, may I, Madam Chairman?
Yes, you may, I'm sorry.
So as things stand now, if there's more than 6 months, how does the highest vote getter, does that go back to the last election, or is that talking about an election about to happen?
It would be the election about to happen.
Okay. Okay, that's the way it is now.
Mhm.
Okay.
Alderman Wiltshire.
So we're not changing that. That, I guess what I'm asking is, if we pass this resolution, the board, on this board, we would get to elect the next incoming alderman. If it's what, 6 months and a day, or?
Right now, this resolution is correcting it so it reads what the current charter should read.
Right.
So that's the correction right now. So, as you know, we are looking at having special election to fill the vacancy for Alderman McCarthy.
Right.
Should the board so wish not to have that special election, they could, under this charter, be allowed to hold off until November 2019, and whoever receives the most votes in the November 2019 election would then be able to fill the unexpired term to January 2020.
So 2 months.
Mhm.
Yes, it wouldn't really make sense for us to wait to fill this seat. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
Alderman Kelly first, and then Alderman Jettie. I'm sorry.
I know.
I apologize.
So my question, I guess, to the members of this board is just sort of back to the intent of why we did this. And my understanding was that we have had multiple special elections that have cost the city a lot of money. So in light of the information that we can choose not to do that, do we still need this amendment, and why do we think that we would?
Okay.
Do you
so,
understand?
Ms. Piazza, maybe you could answer that, because it sounds like this is already in there, but it wasn't.
This basically is a housekeeping issue to
Okay.
clean up the resolution to match the charter, which it currently is. What this will do is still, even though what this is doing, this is changing Resolution 18-073, because what was submitted originally to this board was that we were going to back to what it was prior to 2005. Whereas the board, in lieu of going through a special election, would be able to appoint somebody to fill out the term in lieu of having a special election.
Okay. Alderman Jettie, would you mind if I
No, no.
recognize
she's
Alderman
had her hand
Geffroy?
up. It's your
Thank
turn.
you. She's been very quiet.
Okay, when we first, the first time that I heard about wanting to make that type of change, I had some feelings that as a voter, okay, because if I go to the poll and I vote for people to have these different positions, I wouldn't understand why all of a sudden I would give it to the Board of Aldermen or any other group to make that decision for me. So when I read this, if I've read it correctly, the Board of Aldermen or one of the other groups would appoint someone, might not be the person that would have been next in line from the elections, let's put it that way. So let me just ask, because as it stands now, if it's before the six months, 1 day, we would take the person, the next person in line for the election? No.
No.
Okay.
So
Then I misunderstood something here.
if you look at the amendment and everything on the resolution that Dory Clark put out, what that means now, 6 months in the day, you do not have to have a special election. That'd be the will of the board. But this position would not be filled until the November 2019 election. Because it states that, provided, however, if the board determines that the vacancy shall be filled on the date of the next regularly scheduled municipal election, the vacancy shall not be filled by a special election. That was the part that was left, that was part of the section that was left out. So basically, the candidate that receives the most votes at that regular municipal election for the next term of office, which is then vacant and who's not then an incumbent member of the board, shall be sworn in to complete the unexpired term. So in the case with the special election for alderman at large, if the board so chose not to fill that position and waited until the regular election, it won't be till November 2019, and then that individual will serve to fill the unexpired term from November to January 5, 2020, because that's when the new board would be sworn in, would be January 5, 2020.
Okay. So what if the board says we want to fill that position?
Then we would have a special election.
Okay. So it's up to the board whether we're having the special election or if we're going to wait to the next election, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. But going back to the other piece of that, just so to understand as well, before 6 months, how would we fill that vacancy?
Currently?
Yes.
Special election, before 6 months. Before 6 months and 1 day is a special election. Within 6 months,
Okay, because I thought you just said this is how we did Dave Tenz's
David Tenz's was within 6 months.
within 6 months, yes.
So when he was the highest vote getter in that November election, he then was able to fill the unexpired term.
All right, I understand now, but I do have a comment. For me, I think it would be good if the same type of election is, no matter when it is, you know, that next person should have the opportunity to be that person on the board or fill that vacancy. And I say that mainly because people go to the polls and they vote for who they want. And I feel as though if, no matter who the person is, you know, that next person in line should have that opportunity. Whether it's the beginning or, you know, prior to 6 months or after the 6 months, it doesn't matter. Just a thought. That's my own personal opinion.
So you're saying that if John Smith was the fifth one in line, and now we have a position on the Board of Aldermen, that John Smith should just automatically be pushed up into that position until the next election, until that position expires?
Exactly.
That's what you're saying. Okay, thank you. Alderman Jettie, and then Alderman Kelly, and then Alderman Lopez.
So I respectfully disagree with the clerk on her interpretation of this new ordinance. I think the new ordinance does not say that, number one, it's a charter change, so it wouldn't take effect until the voters vote on it next November. So we cannot avoid the special election to replace Alderman McCarthy. We have to have that special election. And this would not change that because it wouldn't take effect until the voters approved it at the next election. So, because it's a charter change. And plus, I think what this does is it says that, for example, if this were in effect now, then Alderman McCarthy would be replaced through a procedure whereby the Board of Aldermen would then, among the 14 remaining aldermen, would then vote for his replacement. And his replacement would take office as soon as that vote occurred. And with concerning what Alderman Harriet Garthright said, I would be against that type of proposal because you could have, two people running for your position, or think of your election. The voters elected you. Their other choice was someone else who they did not elect. They voted against that person, so to speak. And if something happened to you, to replace you with the person you defeated, I don't think is expressing the will of the voters. You could have somebody, you could have a ward alderman, win 1,000 to 1. Obviously, the voters don't want the person who got that 1, but if the guy with the 1,000 died, we would replace it with the guy who got 1. That doesn't. I don't think that's what the voters would want. I am sensitive to what you originally said, and that was that the voters have the right to elect whoever they want, and when the person that they elected dies or resigns or for whatever reason cannot continue, I understand the concept that by having the Board of Aldermen elect that replacement, we're substituting ourselves for, all of the voters in that ward or in the city. And ideally, we should have a special election, but we have found that special elections don't draw very many people, and they're expensive. And the people who work at the polls, and there are a number of them, and they're basically volunteers, they're there from, well, first, they have to go to a training before the day of the election. And then the day of the election, they're there from like 5 o'clock in the morning until 9, 10 o'clock at night. And at the last special election we had, they were sitting around waiting for voters to show up, twiddling their thumbs. They felt very frustrated by the whole process. So I think as, it's not an ideal situation, but the special elections, people just aren't turning out. It doesn't seem to be working. And we ought to make, I think there are good reasons to make a change. And I thought, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but I thought as a compromise, especially with the smaller boards, like the Board of Public Works, there are 4 elected members and the mayor. So if something happened to one of them, you'd then have 4 people remaining on the board who this would allow to select their successor. So that you'd only have 4 people making that choice. I thought as a compromise, have the Board of Aldermen fill all of the vacancies. So, the Board of Aldermen, there are 15 of us. It's 15 is greater than 4. We represent all of the voters of the city. So I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better to have the Board of Aldermen not only, there's no one else, so we have to do it for ourselves, but for the other boards, the Fire Commission, the Board of Public Works, the Board of Education, whether having 15 people make the choice rather than as little as 4 wouldn't be a good idea.
All right, I'll let Ms. Piazza speak, and then Alderman Lopez will be your turn. Oh, Alderman Kelly first.
So I just want to clarify, Alderman Jettie, the resolution before you, before this committee currently is just revising, adding in that section that does allow, that was passed by the voters on November 8, 2011, that added in that section of provided however that. So that section is already in there and does not need to go before the voters. What you're looking at doing is revising this resolution that would then add the language that was in the original resolution, which would allow the board to fill it within the 60, it says, until the next municipal by election of some qualified by the records of votes of the least majority. So all we're trying to do is amend the section that was passed back in 2011, put it inside this. It's, again, strike through, because the fact is, the only change that we were looking at doing to this resolution was that should there be a vacancy, the vacancy shall be filled until the next municipal by the election of some qualified person by the recorded votes of at least the majority of the members of the board at the next regular meeting or at a special meeting called for the express purpose of filling the vacancy within 60 days following the creation of the vacancy. So I just want to make sure that it's clear. The board at this point is, the committee right now is looking at just now amending the resolution to add in the language that was unfortunately left out, that was passed by the voters in November 2011. And then if this committee then votes to continue the process and vote that it is needed, it then would go back to the board for the public hearing and then go to the voters dealing with the vacancies and how to deal with them in the future.
I understand. So it's a 2-part process. The resolution, I'm not sure what the status of that resolution was. Did it go through this committee and get approved by this committee already?
That is correct. It was sitting at the board waiting for a public hearing
Okay.
to be scheduled.
And so now it's been sent back because of this mistake you
That
found.
is the clarification,
And
correct.
all you're asking the board to do now, this committee to do, is put in that missing language.
Correct.
And then, okay, so as far as the original, after you do that, that original resolution is already out of this committee? So,
No, we took it back.
Right.
okay,
We got it back, so it's in our committee.
okay, so you can do both things. But the first step is to put in the language that was missing.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Alderman
I'm
Kelly?
sorry I
No.
misunderstood.
That's okay, Alderman Jettie. Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. A couple of points of clarification. The current situation that we are in is probably the longest that anyone would ever be vacant for, because the vacancy was in November, and if we go with the way it is now, it would be the next November, correct?
Could you clarify that as far as the longest vacancy, as far as filling
Because-
it, or?
Correct. So like, no office would ever be vacant more than a year, because we always have a yearly election. So the longest you would
No,
go.
that is not correct, because our elections are biennial, so still would have to have a special election, because the fact is, on even years, we do not have elections.
Okay, so you would not be able to append it to the non-municipal every other year. Got it. Thank you. Thank you
You're
for that.
Okay.
The second thing I wanted to say was I do understand Alderman Harriet Gathride's concerns about the citizens being able to be the ones who fill these vacancies. I have thought of that similarly, but I think what has helped me say, okay, is we're at least putting it in front of the voters and letting them decide. We're not unilaterally deciding this is how we would do it. We're going to get an answer from them.
Okay. Alderman Lopez?
I think having the board decide whether it's going to have an election is a reasonable approach. I think having the board decide who's going to fill the spot is not. 15 people is not. It's statistically no different from having 3 or 4 when you have a city as big as Nashua. So I personally wouldn't be in favor of us trying to appoint somebody or elect somebody. And I can't even imagine, I don't think that's what Alderman Jettie was suggesting, but I can't even imagine what the campaigning would look like for that. But I also don't think it would be a good idea to just automatically move to the next person in line without planning another election. I mean, I think in this particular scenario, time has passed. So the next person who was a vote getter, I think, was Chris Williams. So we don't even know whether he's still interested or where he is. So just creating a self-selector where you just move to the next person down, that doesn't do right by the individual. It doesn't do right by the community. And I think there needs to be some kind of intelligent decision making for these instead of just an automatic rule of thumb. Because are we going to ask somebody to run for a position that they're going to have to defend in like 5 months again? An at-large race is expensive, and it's large, not just for the city, but also for the individual who's running who needs to campaign in the entire city. So telling somebody you're going to go through all the work to run for a couple months and then do it again is kind of a proposition. Whereas if the board can just conduct its business and isn't constantly deadlocked, it may be a scenario where the board can decide, okay, I think we can make it for another couple of months until the November election, have the one campaign, let the person who wins join the board early and resolve it that way. Like there aren't that many issues that cannot be resolved and are likely to deadlock and cannot possibly wait until a November election. The budget's one. That's a big thing that we need to pass. But so again, I think having the boards individually have the ability to look at their own situation and say, do we want an extra person, or should we have another election, or can we wait until the next one, is valid because the members of that board were also elected to the board. So they are more accurately representing the will of the people than any arbitrary processes. All that being said, I support the amendment that's being offered because, as I interpret it, this was already done by referendum. The people have already spoken on it. Whoever was on the board of 2012 never implemented it. So we need to correct that and then move forward with the public hearing.
Alderman Wilshire?
Thank you. I can speak firsthand about the board selecting because that's how I first got involved in this board. There was a alderman at large who left the board, and a ward alderman was moved up to the alderman at large position, which left the Ward 7 seat open. And so what happened, there were two people that came forward, myself and Paul Chassie, who was not at the time, but has been on this board since. And what happened was the board interviewed both of us, and they voted right in front of us while we were sitting there, and, you know, Mr. Chassie got the Ward 7 seat. In this case, in the case of the at-large seat being open, I mean, this is how we used to do it. The board would just select somebody who was, you know, known to the board, and that made sense to me. When they changed it, like you said, all these special elections, they cost money. You know, in the scenario that we have before us, if we fill the at-large seat, it's possible that a ward alderman could run for that seat, which would leave us with another special election. So that's, you know, what, $72,000 worth of elections for one, really for one seat, but it would be two, but really for one seat. So I think this really makes sense to go back to the way we used to do it. And I don't want to leave a seat vacant for a year. I think that's asking too much, but that's my opinion. I'm just one vote.
Alderman Lopez.
The point about leaving the seat open, just because that's just the example foremost in our minds. When it came to, for example, Alderman Dean, that was a happy thing. He stepped down after years of service. He had some life changes going on, so it's not always going to be we were forced into the situation and there's nothing to be done about it. And I would also I would like to observe that the older system that President Clerk Wilshire is presenting makes a lot of sense from a fiscal perspective too, and a representational, because the people who elected that one person to represent them still have their representative as an at-large. You can go with all of the at-larges, or you can leave one of them vacant because they represent all of the city and the role is duplicated, whereas the individual wards are not duplicated. That ward, in theory, is represented exclusively by one alderman and then collectively by the other at-larges. The ward constituents lose nothing by having their local alderman become an at-large. Maybe some of the other wards, now their opinions are balanced against 3 other at-larges plus their ward alderman, so you can talk to 5 people instead of just 1 either way, and now it's 4. But nobody's really lost anything under that scenario. What is gained is if you're trying to replace a local alderman versus an at-large, you don't have to have a citywide election, so that saves a lot of time, energy, and resources. And on the part of the person who's campaigning, it's still much more fair to run against, you know, to campaign with your neighbors than the entire city. So I even favor the old system over the one we have right now, just because it seems like a burden the way we do it now.
Okay, Alderman Gidge.
Don't we need a little bit more research on this? Is this getting a little, everybody happy with this?
Okay.
I am, if you're asking.
I think
I think we should do the amendment as presented because it's already in the referendum that was existed. It's an amendment in addition to what we already were committed to doing. So just in my understanding is we're doing something that should have been done like years ago that the people spoke for, in addition to doing what we were already doing.
Alderman Kelly.
I also support this. I want to make sure when we put it on the ballot that it's pretty clear to people. I know that sometimes ballot measures are harder to wade through, so I want to make sure that people get what they're voting for when it comes. And I'll do my part to make sure that information's out there. But
Alderman Jettie.
If I could just dare to clarify
You may.
the missing language that the clerk found that was not on the online version of the charter is law. Whether or not it's on the online version now doesn't matter. It's already law. What we're doing here, what you're doing here tonight, is not doing anything about making that law. It's already law. All you're doing is changing the wording of the resolution that will appear before the voters to clarify that, to clarify what it is now and how you're proposing to change it. But what the voters did a couple of years ago is done. That's law.
Did you understand that, Alderman Gedge?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
No, that's okay. I too agree, we just need, it's housekeeping, and then it's trying to take into consideration the resolution that we brought forward to make some changes. So, do we have any other questions on that? Okay, Alderman Wilshire.
The motion before us is to amend Resolution 18073 by replacing it with the proposed amendment attached to Attorney Clark's memo accepted earlier this evening.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Next.
And I will make a motion to recommend R 18073, recommend final passage of R 18073 as amended.
Okay, any questions, concerns? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we have unfinished business, ordinances,
We have none?
new business?
None?
Okay, and we have something tabled.
No, leave it there, please.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Piazza.
Thank you.
Okay. Public comment? There's no one here. Any remarks by the alderman? Nothing? I thank you all for your patience in getting through some of these resolutions, but we want to make sure that we have everything done right so that we can present in 2 weeks. No non-public. Alderman Wilshire.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion is to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? And we are adjourned at 8:17. Thank you all.